Diane put me at table 47 near the service entrance. She checked my hands one final time, frowning at the calluses her lotion couldn't hide. "Stay in the back," she hissed. "Tonight, I'll impress her." I watched my wife cross the ballroom toward the stage, toward Eleanor Vance. Eleanor didn't stop at Diane. She walked past her, past the executives and donors, directly to table 47, to me. She took my hands in hers. Her thumb pressed into the keloid scar on my palm. 28 years, she whispered. Behind us, Diane's champagne glass shattered on marble. One click on subscribe and a comment with your city helps more than you know. Thank you for watching. My name is Garrett Lindemann. I'm 52 years old, and I spent the last 28 years believing I wasn't worth remembering. In 1994, I threw a 93 MPH Fastball. The scouts sat behind home plate with their radar guns and notebooks, pencils moving every time I released the ball. Minor league ball, sure, but the arm was there. The control was coming. My father sat in the third row, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup even though it was August, and he nodded once when the pitch crossed the plate. That nod meant everything. 6 weeks later, he collapsed shoveling the driveway. Heart attack. Dead before the ambulance arrived. My mother had nothing. My sister was 16. I walked away from baseball the same week I buried my father, and I never looked back. Not once. I took his place at IBEW Local 494, learned to pull wire, learned to show up early. The other journeymen called me Steady Lindy because I never missed a shift. 28 years of that steadiness, and I earned every callus on my hands. A $98,000 salary by the end, a $1.2 million pension waiting when I retired. The night I met Eleanor Vance, rain was hammering Chicago so hard the gutters couldn't keep up. I ducked into a diner on Halstead to wait it out. The woman who would change everything was in the corner booth, surrounded by textbooks, cramming for MIT finals. She looked up. I sat down. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a coffee cup she'd been nursing for hours. I ordered cherry pie I didn't want just to have a reason to stay. We talked until 3 in the morning. Then the next night. Then every night I could manage the drive from Milwaukee for 3 months straight. The diner smelled like old coffee and wet pavement, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, rain streaking the windows while we talked about everything and nothing. She asked about my father's Timex before I mentioned it. She noticed the scar on my palm and asked its story. She was building security concepts for a thesis project, and I told her about electrical vulnerabilities, about how buildings could be compromised through their own infrastructure. She wrote it all down. When the offer came from a tech startup in California, she took it. I understood. I would have done the same. I wrote her 43 letters over the next year. Not one answer. The silence hollowed me out. I stopped throwing the baseball for a while. Stopped keeping the anomaly journal I'd started in my father's honor. I convinced myself I'd imagined the connection, that 3 months of late-night conversation meant nothing to someone building a future I couldn't follow her into. Diane appeared in that hollow space. She was attractive, organized, and she seemed to appreciate my steadiness. We married in 1996. I thought I was building something. 26 years of marriage taught me otherwise. Diane moved my union certificates to the basement. She introduced me at parties as my husband without using my name. She wanted someone who would provide without expecting recognition, who would fade into the background at her events. She wanted furniture that earned a paycheck. I gave her all of it. Ego, every accommodation, every swallowed response. Every time she corrected my grammar in front of her clients, and I said nothing. Now I stand at table 47, near the service entrance where she positioned me, and Eleanor Vance is holding my hands. Every night, I still throw 50 pitches into my father's old catcher's mitt before bed. The leather has gone pale from 3 decades of use. The signatures from my teammates have faded to ghosts. My union brothers respect me. They ask for my help on difficult jobs. They remember my father and tell me I've done him proud. My wife treats me like an embarrassment she's learned to tolerate. Eleanor's thumb presses into the scar on my palm, and I remember the skillet, the burn, the way she kissed the wound and called me her reflex hero. 28 years. I believed she forgot me. I believed I wasn't worth remembering. Her eyes tell me I was wrong. The union certificates went to the basement in 2002. Diane said they clashed with the living room aesthetic. Master electrician, State of Wisconsin, 25 years of service, IBEW, Local 494. Framed documents that took me a decade to earn, now stacked behind the water heater where no guest would see them. I helped her carry them down, held the flashlight while she found a spot between the Christmas decorations and my father's old toolbox. Perfect, she said. Now the room can breathe. The photographs came next. Our wedding album stayed on the shelf, but candids disappeared over months. The shot of me at the Union Hall, receiving my journeyman certificate. The picture from my son Charlie's Little League game, where my work shirt was visible. The family portrait, where my hands showed. 3 years later, a box in her office closet held them all. I was looking for tax documents. Every photo had been cropped or replaced with a version where I was cut out entirely, standing just outside the frame. Diane introduced me to her clients as my husband without using my name. When pressed, she'd say I worked in construction, not electrical, not union, construction, something vague enough to dismiss. Her event planning business operated at break-even. Good years brought $30,000 in profit. Bad years brought credit card debt she hid until the statements arrived. My $98,000 salary paid the mortgage, funded Charlie's college, built the retirement she'd someday enjoy. My $1.2 million pension would keep us comfortable for decades. None of that mattered. I worked with my hands, and that made me invisible. December 2019. Diane's holiday showcase for her biggest clients. She'd transformed our living room into what she called staged elegance. I stood near the fireplace in the suit she'd selected, holding a glass of wine I wasn't drinking. One of Diane's regular clients, a woman in pearls, approached. "You must be Diane's husband. She's told us so much about you." Before I could respond, Diane materialized at my elbow. "Oh, that's just the help tonight," she said, laughing. "Garrett, would you check on the caterers?" The woman's expression flickered. Confusion, then polite acceptance. I walked toward the kitchen without correcting anyone. The caterer glanced up. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just checking." August 2021. Union picnic at Veterans Park. My brothers from Local 494 gathered around the grills, their families spread across the pavilion. Diane had refused to come for years, but this time the wife of a potential client would be attending. I found her near the dessert table, surrounded by women she'd never met before. "The smell," Diane said, loud enough to carry, "copper wire and machine oil. I've tried everything. Special detergent, fabric softener. Nothing works. 25 years of marriage, and my house still smells like a construction site." Pete Kowalski, my foreman, stood 10 feet away. He studied his plate. His wife's jaw tightened. I walked to the grill and flipped burgers that didn't need flipping. March 2024, dinner party. 8 guests, all connected to Diane's expanding network. I'd been instructed to wear the blue blazer, say nothing about work, and keep my hands below the table. The conversation turned to careers. A marketing executive described his latest campaign. An architect discussed a downtown renovation. The questions circled toward me. And what do you do, Garrett? Diane's foot pressed against mine under the table. A warning. I work in infrastructure, I said. The vaguest possible answer. He's being modest, Diane cut in. Garrett handles technical support for commercial buildings. Very behind the scenes. The table nodded and moved on. I excused myself to check on the coffee. My son Charlie witnessed these moments. He was 24 now, an architect in Chicago, successful enough to make Diane proud. When he visited, his jaw worked the way mine used to, before I learned to stop. The corrected grammar, the dismissive waves, the way his mother spoke about his father like discussing an appliance that functioned adequately but lacked style. Charlie said nothing. Keeping peace required silence from both of us. Diane's Pinterest board contained 2,847 pins, 3M to 5-member estates in communities we'd never afford. She'd been updating it for 15 years, adding new properties, noting architectural details, saving listings in neighborhoods where wealth concentrated. Our Wauwatosa Colonial was worth $567,000. 4 bedrooms, adequate yard, good schools. A home most families would consider fortunate. Diane considered it a prison sentence. Her filing cabinet stayed locked. I noticed her checking the lock after the dinner guests left. Client contracts, she said. Vendor agreements. Nothing that concerns you. The invitation arrived in September. Cream envelope, gold embossing. Eleanor Vance Foundation Annual Gala. Diane's hands trembled as she opened it. I'd never seen her hands shake for anything I'd done. "The Eleanor Vance," she whispered. "This is the connection I've been waiting for my entire career." I found table 47 tucked between a service corridor and an emergency exit. The centerpiece was smaller than the others. The chairs faced the kitchen doors. From here, I could see the entire ballroom, but remained invisible to anyone who mattered. My hands still felt slick from the lotion Diane had worked into them in the bathroom. Her fingers had pressed into the calluses, frowning at skin that had spent 30 years gripping wire and climbing ladders. She'd smoothed my rental lapel, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like arranging furniture. Then the instruction, "Stay in the back. Tonight, I'll impress her." She'd left without waiting for my response. 26 years of marriage had taught her she didn't need to. Diane had positioned herself near the stage, close to table 2 where Eleanor Vance would speak. I watched my wife work the room. She laughed 3 beats too long at something a man in a custom suit said. Her hand touched his arm, lingered, moved to the next prospect. She leaned in close, name dropped, with the precision of someone who'd memorized the guest list. Victoria Chase, a competing event planner Diane had feuded with for years, stood near the bar, watching. Her expression was neutral. The corners of her mouth said otherwise. The string quartet shifted from background ambiance to something processional. The crowd turned toward the entrance. Eleanor Vance walked in alone. She wore simple black, no jewelry except small diamond studs. At 52, she moved through the crowd like she built it. This gala, this foundation, this entire evening existed because she'd decided it should. Her eyes swept the room, searching. Diane intercepted her near table 3. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the pitch. I'd helped her practice it for weeks. event planning services, exclusive clientele, the kind of partnership that could transform a career. Eleanor nodded politely. Her response was brief. Her eyes kept moving, scanning faces, tables, the far corners of the ballroom where the less important guests had been placed. Her gaze reached table 47. She stopped mid-sentence. Diane was still talking, gesturing with her champagne, but Eleanor had already turned away. She walked toward me. The crowd parted without her asking. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. 400 people watched Eleanor Vance cross the entire ballroom, past the A-list tables, past the executives and philanthropists, past my wife frozen mid-pitch with her mouth still open. She stopped in front of table 47. Garrett. I stood. My hands hung at my sides, still faintly slick with lotion that couldn't hide 30 years of wire and ladders. Eleanor took them anyway. Her fingers wrapped around mine, and her thumb pressed into my right palm, into the keloid scar I'd carried for 28 years. I know these hands, she said. The scar was from a hot skillet in her cramped apartment kitchen. I'd grabbed it before it could fall on her. She'd kissed the burn and called me her reflex hero. Eleanor, my voice came out rough. I wrote you 43 letters. I know. Her thumb traced the scar's raised edge. I wrote you 147. Behind us, crystal shattered on marble. The sound cut through the string quartet, the conversation, everything. I turned. Diane stood 15 feet away, champagne pooling around her designer heels, the broken stem still in her hand. She didn't move. The color left her face. 400 guests stared at her, at the billionaire holding her husband's calloused hands, at the electrician she'd hidden at table 47. Victoria Chase's phone was already raised. Eleanor didn't look at Diane. She looked at me, her thumb still pressed against the scar she'd given me half a lifetime ago. We need to talk, she said. 28 years ago, I wrote you back, every letter. Eleanor led me through a service corridor, past catering staff who stepped aside, eyes fixed on their warming trays. Through velvet curtains, the string quartet thinned to distant vibration. Through the gap, I could see Diane still standing where we'd left her, champagne pooling around her heels. Why didn't you write back? Lines I didn't remember creased the corners of Eleanor's eyes. I sent letters for 16 years, from 1994 until 2010, when I finally gave up. I hired investigators. I never stopped trying to understand. I wrote you 43 times, I said, every week for 10 months, then less. Then I stopped, because silence is its own answer. That's impossible. I never received. She stopped. Her hand found mine again, pressed into the scar. Someone intercepted them, both directions. A man approached from the shadows. Late 50s, spine straight, hands still at his sides, the kind of stillness that came from years of federal work. He carried a tablet like it was evidence in a case he'd been building for months. Marcus Webb, Eleanor said, my head of security. He's been investigating this for a year. Webb nodded once. Mr. Lindemann, I have answers you're going to want. Some you won't. He turned the tablet toward me. The screen showed a photograph of a fireproof lockbox, lid open, stuffed with envelopes. 147 letters, Webb said, found in your wife's closet during a private investigation last March. We didn't remove them, just documented. Webb pinched the screen. Eleanor's handwriting filled the display. Postmark read, October 1994. The month she left for California. She kept them, I said. The words came out flat. All of them. Everyone. Webb swiped to the next image. stacks of letters arranged chronologically on a table. The early correspondence is personal. Love letters, plans for the future, discussions about relocating. He paused. By 1997, she's asking why you've stopped. By 2003, another pause. She's begging. Eleanor's grip tightened on my hand. Webb swiped again. Phone records from 2003. Mrs. Vance hired a private investigator to locate you. The investigator made contact with your residence. The screen showed a call log, a Milwaukee number I recognized. My home phone. Someone at that number told my investigator you were deceased, Eleanor said. A workplace accident, they said. Your family preferred privacy. I stared at the timestamp. November 14, 2003. I'd been on a job site in Racine that week, installing panels at a new hospital wing. There's more. Webb pulled up another document. Certified mail receipts bearing my forged signature. The handwriting was close but wrong. The middle initial was missing. Your wife signed for registered correspondence using your name. At least 4 occasions between 2004 and 2010. Eleanor released my hand. She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded letter, the paper worn at the creases. This was my last attempt, she said. 2010. I'd accepted you'd chosen to forget me, that everything we had meant nothing to you. She unfolded the letter. The handwriting was smaller than in the photographs, cramped with resignation. I couldn't read the words. I couldn't look away from them either. The security concepts that built Vance Technologies, Eleanor said quietly, came from our conversations in 1994. The vulnerability patterns you explained. How buildings could be compromised through their own electrical infrastructure. The way you described junction boxes as potential access points. She looked at me. I built a $4.7 billion company on ideas we developed together in a diner that smelled like old coffee. Webb lowered the tablet. Laughter cut through the curtains. Glasses clinked. A world continuing while mine collapsed. 28 years. Not because Eleanor abandoned me, not because I wasn't worth remembering, because Diane intercepted every letter, told investigators I was dead, forged my signature on federal mail. She stole the life I was supposed to have. Then she made me believe it was my fault for not being memorable enough to keep. I need to see those letters, I said. My voice was quiet. The old habit. But I didn't lower my eyes. Webb nodded. I can have copies to your attorney by morning. The originals remain with your wife until legal proceedings determine otherwise. Eleanor touched my arm. Garrett, I'm sorry. I should have tried harder. I should have. You tried for 16 years. I looked at her. You hired investigators. You wrote 147 letters. You did everything right. Through the gap in the curtains, I watched Diane finally move. She was heading toward us, her social smile already reassembling itself. She's coming, I said. Eleanor straightened. Webb stepped back, tablet tucked under his arm. I didn't turn away from my wife's approach. For the first time in 26 years, I wanted her to find me. Diane approached with her social smile already back in place. The champagne stain spread across her designer heels, but her posture said nothing had happened. 26 years of marriage had taught me every angle of that performance. Garrett, darling, we should let Mrs. Vance enjoy her evening. Her voice carried the practiced warmth she reserved for clients. This is her gala, after all. Eleanor's expression hardened. Her hand found mine again. I need you to stop talking. I kept my voice level. Just stop. I've spent 26 years listening. Now you're going to hear what I have to say. Diane's smile flickered. The lines around her mouth cut deeper. Garrett, you're embarrassing yourself. She glanced at Eleanor. He's not usually like this. The stress of these events. 147 letters. I kept my voice level. That's how many Eleanor wrote me. They're in a lockbox in your closet. Marcus Webb found them in March. The color left Diane's face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't know what you're talking about. You told investigators I was dead. November 2003. A workplace accident. You forged my signature on certified mail 4 times between 2004 and 2010. Federal mail. This is insane. Diane's voice climbed half an octave. Eleanor, I apologize for my husband. He's having some kind of episode. The phone records exist, Eleanor said. The forged receipts exist. The letters exist. I did everything for this family. Diane's posture shifted, wounded, then defiant, then pleading. 26 years of sacrifice. Building a home, raising our son, supporting his career while she gestured at me, while he climbed ladders and pulled wire. And this is the thanks I get? Movement at the edge of my vision. Charlie stood near the service corridor, his face pale. My son, in the formal wear his mother had selected. He'd heard everything. Mom. His voice was quiet. Is it true? Diane turned. Her jaw trembled. Just for a second. Charlie, sweetheart, this is adult business. Why don't you? Is it true? His jaw worked the same way mine used to. Did you intercept Dad's letters? You don't understand. Diane's voice cracked. I was protecting our family. She was going to take him away. Some woman he'd known for 3 months was going to destroy everything we built. You told investigators he was dead, Eleanor said, because you wouldn't stop. The words tore out of Diane. Her voice echoed against the marble. 16 years of letters. 16 years of investigators. You had everything. Money, success, a company worth billions. And you still wanted him. She pointed at me. Her hand shook. She was going to take you away. You were mine. The admission hung in the air. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see guests turning toward the sound. Victoria Chase stood near the entrance to our alcove, phone raised. Marcus Webb had his tablet out, documenting. I looked at my father's watch. The scratched crystal. The worn leather band, warm against my wrist. 31 years of honest work on his wrist, then 28 on mine. I unfastened the clasp and held it in my palm. You didn't steal my past, I said. You stole my choice. Diane stared at me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Garrett. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Please. I fastened the watch back on my wrist. Then I turned and walked toward Eleanor. Behind me, Diane stood surrounded by the people she'd spent decades trying to impress. Victoria Chase was still recording. Marcus Webb was still documenting. Charlie remained frozen near the service corridor, his jaw slack, his hands at his sides. Eleanor fell into step beside me. Her hand found mine as we walked through the curtains, past the guests who gathered to witness, past table 47 where I'd been positioned to stay invisible. I didn't look back. The string quartet had stopped playing. Every guest in the ballroom watched the electrician from table 47 walk out of the lakefront grand ballroom with a billionaire on his arm. Eleanor's hand stayed in mine as we walked through the doors. The calluses didn't matter. They never had. 3 months after the gala, Victoria Chase's video hit 12 million views. The headline read, Event planner's 28-year deception exposed at own client's gala. I watched the view counter climb from my brother Jason's guest room, where I'd been staying since the night I walked out of the lakefront grand ballroom. The footage showed Diane, frozen in the ballroom, champagne pooling at her feet, mouth hanging open as Eleanor Vance walked away holding my hand. Someone had added subtitles for Diane's confession. "She was going to take you away. You were mine." The words repeated in a looping clip that spread across every platform within hours. Lindemann Event Design lost its first client the next morning. By the end of the week, 17 cancellations sat in Diane's inbox. I knew because her lawyer included the business records in discovery. Every client gone. The Milwaukee event planning circuit closed ranks. Victoria Chase didn't need to say anything. The video spoke for itself. Vendors stopped returning calls. Venues removed Diane from their preferred lists. The network she'd spent 15 years building was gone in days. My divorce attorney, Rachel Okonkwo, called on a Tuesday. She'd handled a fraud case for me 6 years ago, and I trusted her precision. "Found something in the financial discovery," she said. "Your wife drew against the home equity line 3 separate times. $72,000 total. The statements were sent to a P.O. box you didn't know existed. $72,000. Borrowed against a house I'd paid for with 30 years of pulling wire." The Wauwatosa Colonial went on the market in February. The real estate agent, a woman named Sandra who'd worked with Diane on charity events, walked through rooms I'd wired myself. She didn't mention how she knew my wife. Professional courtesy. Diane's share of the sale came to $187,000 after the mortgage and her hidden debt. The woman who'd pinned 2,847 images of $3 to $5 million estates walked away with enough for first and last month's rent on a studio apartment in West Allis. Charlie helped me pack my father's toolbox. My son had driven from Chicago 3 times since the gala, each visit longer than the last. We didn't talk about his mother. We talked about load calculations and the Cubs and whether I'd consider consulting work. "I should have said something," he told me one evening, wrapping newspaper around my father's level. "All those years. I saw how she treated you." "You kept the peace," I said. "I taught you that." "You taught me wrong." I couldn't argue. 26 years of silence had taught us both the same lesson. Quiet accommodation wasn't strength. It was permission. The federal charges came in March. Mail fraud for forging my signature on certified receipts. The U.S. Attorney's Office had been building the case since Marcus Webb handed over the evidence. The prosecutor entered her Pinterest board as evidence. 2,800 pins documenting Eleanor's properties over 15 years. Premeditation, he called it. I didn't attend the arraignment. Rachel sent me the court documents. Diane pleaded not guilty, but the forged signatures matched her handwriting analysis. The receipts bore her fingerprints. April brought the final image I carry. Charlie had driven past her new address, a studio in a complex off Highway 100. Through the window, he saw boxes stacked against walls. "Designer knockoffs," he said. The fake luxury she'd chased for decades, now boxing her in. She was sitting on a folding chair, phone in hand, scrolling. Charlie watched for 10 minutes. She never looked up from the screen. I asked him later what he thought she was looking at. "Facebook," he said. "People she used to know. Posting about her." The woman who measured her worth through perception had become invisible to everyone who'd ever mattered to her. The event planning circuit she'd clawed her way into had erased her name from their contacts. The social circles she'd cultivated for 26 years had moved on to fresher gossip. I closed the browser tab showing her address, made coffee. The routine hadn't changed. The current had found its path. Not the path Diane had tried to force. Not the detour she'd engineered with intercepted letters and forged signatures and whispered lies to investigators. Diane sat alone in a studio apartment, scrolling through posts from people who used to take her calls. Feeling connected to my revenge? Hit like and give me a score from 1 to 10. Explain in the comments. Eleanor's San Francisco townhouse sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the bay. 4 rooms, original hardwood, a kitchen where we cooked together without speaking much. 9 months since the gala, and we'd learned something about patience. I consulted for her foundation now. The Milwaukee Trade School Initiative needed someone who understood load calculations and junction boxes, someone who could explain why apprenticeships mattered. They asked me to explain voltage drop calculations to their board. First time anyone in a suit took notes. My son, Charlie, visited twice a month. He sat across from me at Eleanor's small dining table, and we talked. Not around things, through them. Why did you stay quiet so long? He asked last visit. Thought I was teaching you strength. You are teaching me to disappear. I nodded. I won't make that mistake. Neither will I. He meant it. First promise he'd made that I knew he could keep. The catcher's mitt traveled with me from Milwaukee. Every night before bed, 50 throws into leather so old it had turned white. The same routine I'd kept for 28 years, but the ball landed different now. Same leather, same motion. I wasn't throwing at ghosts anymore. Eleanor watched me throw one evening, her shoulder against the doorframe. Salt air drifted through the open window. The neighborhood was quiet. I caught the ball, held it. Like a 3-way switch, I said. 2 different paths to the same light. The current doesn't care which route. It just finds what works. 28 years of detour. The current found its path.